Here we are. It is Saturday the 13th of July 2019. We're here with Don Fowler to talk about the history of the Nelson Rugby Football Club in preparation for the 150th celebration they have coming up in 2020. So on camera we have Brian MacIntrye, Kerry Barton in the background, and we may as well launch into the questions. So, thank you for the interview, Don. It's really nice to talk to you, and I'm really keen to hear about your involvement with the club, playing days. As a start, do you want to tell us how you got into rugby? What's your earliest rugby memory?
Well, first of all, I've been approached several times to do this, and I've always turned them down. But mainly because Kerry's twisted my arm several times. I've said, yes, okay, I'll do it on this one occasion. So that's the reason I'm here.
Excellent.
Well, it goes back, when I first joined the club was 1950. The lowest grade at that stage was 5th grade, and that's what I joined. And the main person that was instrumental in getting me into the club was a chap called Anton Gargiulio. He came to me one day and he said, why are you involved with another club and not playing for Nelson? And I said, oh, I don't know really. And so he said, I think you should come to our club. I said, righto, I'll be there next season. And that was late 1969, so 1949. So I started with the club in 1950, in 5th grade.
Yeah.
All right?
And
the reason I joined the club, apart from Anton, was the fact that the Nelson Club had a great record as far as organisation, good coaching, etc., etc. So that was one of the mainly the two reasons that I wanted to join the club.
How big was the club in those days?
Well, we had teams in every grade, from 5th grade up to senior. There was 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, junior and senior. And at that stage I was ball boy at the park for years.
For the senior team?
No, for the Nelson Club.
Yeah.
And we did it under the auspices of the Nelson Union, the old Nelson Union. We were paid £0.50 a Saturday to bring the flags in, and luckily enough in 1950, John Parks, who played for the club also, and myself were selected to be ball boys for the British Lions in 1950 here. That was a big occasion.
Yeah. And okay.
Trafalgar Park in those days had 2 full-size grounds on the main ground, and they ran north to south, adjacent to each other, and there was a small gap down the centre. Apart from that, there was Tahuna Nui, and that was the main grounds.
So coming up through the age groups, it was all at Tahuna Nui?
Yeah. And then, and Rutherford Park, opposite Falkland Point School was where we trained some nights when I got to senior.
Yeah. Okay. What were the most memorable moments or events of your playing career? What were the real highlights of?
Well, let's have a look here. Most of the highlights were, being involved in the club, having good competitions as we moved up the grades and through the grades, and was winning the club competitions, winning the championships. That was the main incentive to be conspicuous. And if you were good enough to be selected in representative sides, which I was fortunate enough to do this during on my way up through the grades and that. And then my biggest thing was being selected in the rep squad, and eventually we went to Westport in 1960, I think it was, when we won the Seddon Shield and brought it back home to Nelson.
Yep. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about how big the club scene was in those days, and who were the most, I guess, the toughest competition in the club?
The old Nelson competition in the lower grades, like the 5th grade and the 4th grade and the 3rd grade, right up to junior. Nelson College obviously was the main competitor. Nelson College in the 5th grade had something like 4 sides: College A, College B, C and D, and so on, and went up through the grades, and then they got to 3rd grade, I think they had 1 side, and then the juniors was Nelson College first 15.
Okay. And other clubs around the city, like, I don't know, Win Rival and...
Yeah, there was rivals, there was old boys which didn't have the lower grade ones because they were sort of ex-Nelson College guys, and there was Stoke, which in those days was Star for a start. There was Waimea, and there was Wanderers wasn't available then, because Wanderers came about by being two clubs amalgamated, which was Pirates from Brightwater and Rovers from Wakefield, and they amalgamated to make the club Wanderers.
So you've had a long career. Who were the most influential people in your playing days?
Well, obviously Anton Gargiulia, because he taught me to come to the club in the first instance. And the second one was Mick Kinzer, because when I made the rep squad, the senior rep squad, he taught me into endeavouring to improve my positional play and that sort of thing, to become, I used to mainly play fullback, and he wanted me to become a first 5'8" as well, because with Noel Damon, who played for our club, he was involved a lot with the representative side, and he wanted me to fill in as a first 5'8" when Noel was called up for rep duties and that. So that's how he wanted. He kept pushing to me and saying, you need to specialise more in first 5'8", God. So those were the two guys that were really instrumental in. Different coaches along the way, they had different ideas about different things and that, but they were the two main ones.
Yeah. And other players, was there competition for the fullback first 5 roles?
Well, when you moved up through the grades, you became a part of the team and all that sort of thing. When I got to senior, which I went there when I was about 18, Jack Quirk was the fullback, and he said he was getting towards the end of his twilight of his career, and he said, well, I'm there if anything happens and they want a more experienced fullback, and that obviously he would be selected, but most times he stood aside and let me take up the role of fullback, and I sort of worked my way into senior football through that reason.
Yeah. Okay, so you joined the senior side as an 18-year-old, or first played for the senior side as an 18-year-old?
Yeah, I did, yes.
How did you get on physically?
It happened how, because of the representative game on, and they had a fixture against Wanderers at Wakefield, and I was approached to go and play for the seniors that day, and we were quite successful, so we won that game, and then we moved on to the final against Wanderers again later on, 2 or 3 Saturdays later at Trafalgar Park. And Litka Julia was the captain in those days, and I played quite well that day, and so they just said to me after that thing, come up to senior next year and join the squad.
Yeah.
That's how it happened.
Yeah. Cool. So, guys, and the physicality of going from the junior grades up to the senior grades?
Well, I've always been quite a big build guy,
Yeah.
and the step up wasn't too much of a grade, because I've been playing junior, which was against College First 15 and those sort of guys, and Old Boys and Rivals and Celtic and all those sort of clubs.
Yeah.
So it was no different. The standard was a bit faster in senior, but nothing great.
Yeah. I'm curious, you see the professional players today, and because they're professionals, they just spend their time bulking up and getting fast and that sort of thing. Yeah, I guess you would have been bigger than average back in the 50s. Yeah. How do you think things would compare today if you were... It's probably a hard question to answer, but what do you think of today's game compared to the early days?
You've got out of...
I have way off, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'd be... I think it's so fast now that unless you're really a full-time rugby player, you'd find it hard to be involved.
So again, I'm just curious, comparing professional rugby to amateur rugby back in the 50s. Today the players have plenty of time to spend in the gym, they're paid to do it. Back in the 50s you had to find other ways to keep fit. How did you keep fit for rugby, and what was your training regime?
Well, in those days the season didn't really start till about late April, say, May, and it went right through to September, October, so it was a different part of the year, because a lot of us were playing cricket or other sports before we got involved in rugby, but because I was a big physique guy, I sort of had to start earlier. So another chap called Noel Barton, him and I used to go to the Botanics, and we'd start probably the end of January, and we'd start running and just, fitness, just put up the mileage just to get ourselves right and get reasonably fit before we started the club training, say in late March, April.
Yeah, up and down the hill or around?
No, just round the base of the nothing too strenuous.
Yeah. So, who were the most talented players that you played against? Nelson. I think I'm right in saying this. I'm not aware of too many All Blacks that have come out of Nelson, but there have clearly been some great players who have played around here. Who were the best that you remember?
Well, we're mainly talking about the Nelson Club, and that's the ones I was sort of focusing on. But there was a chap called George Miller. He came to us and he played second 5'8", and he was never really recognised. He was a really great footballer, a lot of ability, but never made the rep side. And I don't know why, for what reason, but he was one. But there was lots of other guys. I mean, it's too numerous because we were a pretty strong side in those days, Nelson Club, and you know, you had forwards and you had backs and you had chaps, you know, that it's hard to sort of pick out and identify, but there was lots of forwards. Like our forward pack was renowned because we were big and we played that style of game, and then later on, after a number of years, we started to flourish and play a lot more expansive game than that. But there was, you know, there was the likes of Carl Trelin and Maury Pugh, Noel Barton, Rex Kerner, and all those guys. You know, they were representative players that played for our club side, and so we were very fortunate to have talent like that played for the senior side.
Mm. What, who brought in the change to move from kind of the forward-focused game into the expensive game you just talked about?
As we had a change of personnel in the coaching, they had different ideas. Some of them wanted to just maintain the game and play the forwards, and because we were so strong up there, you know, have a kicking first 5'8" for territory and so on and so forth. But generally later on, you know, we had the ability in the backs as well, so we started to move the ball further and more involved, like well, we call it college rugby, you know, move the ball to the wings and break down there, the forwards are there and give us the ball for resupply and so on. So, yeah, but it depends on each coach. Each coach seemed to always have and we were lucky we had so many, you know, chaps that had come through the club style previous years that were coaching us, and so they usually maintained and kept that style, you know, progressively over the years.
Yeah. So games presumably were each Saturday when you played for the club. How much training did you guys, formal training, did you do during the week, and then what were your routines on the day of the game?
Well, it was quite simple. It was pretty straightforward. Most clubs did the same, 2 nights a week. We usually trained on Mondays and Thursdays, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, depends on how it suited the time and the makeup of the team that we were actually in on that particular year. So it was that, and then we played on the Saturday. Once we got involved in representative football, we occasionally had runs on Sunday mornings, and that was the main basis. It was Tuesdays, Thursdays, play Saturday, and if you happened to make the rep side, sometimes there was a run on the Sunday morning.
Did you have any pre-match routines? These days you see the players with their headphones on and doing all this sort of stuff. In the old days it might be, I don't know, you had a steak and beans for breakfast or something. Did you do anything special on the days of the game?
Nothing out of the ordinary, just the normal. You get up and get yourself organised, clean your boots and make sure everything was right. You had all your gear and away you go, and you're normally there half an hour, 3/4 of an hour before the game. You just go to the dressing case, you get to change, sit down, and the coach will give you the last few words of what wisdom, and then we take off from there, and then half time we got another bit of a briefing. If we weren't doing too good, we got a bit of a stir up, and if not, well, we just kept coasting. Yeah.
Any messages from the coach that stand out? Any rack ups or things that you ever got?
No, we were pretty good because we had most times we had usually good sides, and we were usually pretty competitive. Occasionally we might have been behind by 1 or 2 points, and there were 1 or 2 things pointed out that we should change our style or just do something a little bit different for a change, and that seemed to work, and that. Yeah. So there's nothing out of the ordinary, no.
Okay, I did do. I'll ask you about your goals that you had through your career, and then we'll move into the time that you hung up your boots, what you call time in your career.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I started. Yeah, all right. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so when your career started with the juniors in 1950, when did you?
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade, and it ran for. I'm sorry, I don't know how many years exactly it ran for. But it would be a playing time of 15, 20 years at least, I would say.
About 15 years I played, I think I finished about 1964 from memory.
Yeah.
That was the reason was because, I recently got married, and a couple of years before that, we had a family. I was playing cricket as well, so I couldn't do the both, and I was setting out a new section and that, so I decided that, I'd sort of done all the things I wanted to do, and yeah, so I just retired and got into administration.
Yeah. What had been your playing goals through your career? Did you have goals at the start that you wanted to make the Nelson?
Oh,
side,
I think
or?
everybody has goals. They want to achieve representative honours if they're good enough or feel they're good enough, and you know, you train accordingly. Some people just want to play club football and they're quite interested in that, and just happy to do that. But others want to get the higher honours, and then from that they get on to representative higher honours and so on and so forth. But you know, Nelson in those days was. We weren't strong at rugby, you know. We had good record amongst other provincial unions of our same size, but when you compare us to, you know, the likes of Wellington and the metropolitan areas, well, we were in a different category altogether.
Did you ever go off on tours with the Nelson Club? Like, reading through the 100-year history, back in the 1870s, when, you know, just after rugby had started and was starting to get a bigger following in New Zealand, the Nelson Club or the Nelson combined team went off and did tours of Wellington and Auckland visited and that sort of stuff. Did the Nelson Club ever do much of that around top of the South Island or across to Wellington in your playing days?
Not my playing days. No, we had a stalwart that joined our club called Ron Eastgate, and he'd played years ago. Played for the Kiwi Club in Hokitika, and that family presented a cup for competition between the Kiwi Club and the Nelson Club, and we used to alternate. We'd go down every second year to Hokitika, and they'd come up every second year and play us in the alternative years, and that was involved in that. That was a regular fixture. Other ones we'd have a trip to here. We might just have a friendly game against someone in Muchawega because it was a separate sub-union that day in the old Golden Bay Union. But other than that, we went to a Rua up in the North Island, and yeah, there wasn't much other outside tours. We went to Australia in 1963, I think it was, or 64, and that was a big project. We did a lot of fundraising. And there was Noel Bart and myself, Maury Nelson and 2 or 3 others. We arranged all the working bees, and from that we got enough finance to take a team over there, and we played 3 games in Australia. That was prior to the next season, because we were losing 1 or 2 personnel in the seniors, and the ones that were coming in didn't have the senior experience. We thought this was a good opportunity, take them over and blood them, and from that, yeah, it worked out quite well, and we had good results over there. We had 3 wins over there in Aussie.
Yeah.
We played the Macquarie University, we played Newcastle, and I can't remember what the other game was.
Yeah. I can imagine something like that back in those days would have been quite a big undertaking, because even just the travel time would have been at least, I don't know, twice.
Well, you know, we did it. We'd raised enough money that each player he got 2 shirts and playing gear and all that arranged for him, and a pair of trousers. That was all provided. In those days, that was a big thing to give the players something like that, and then give them a free trip virtually to Aussie.
Yeah. Jumping back subjects a little bit, I'm just curious. The pre-match routine, you got your clothes together and stuff. After the match, did you have someone who took care of all the laundry? Was it a roster thing for the club, or is that something that's changed these days?
Well, the club, you know, they weren't flush with money at those stages, and there'd be somebody we'd engage at the start of the season that used to wash the senior jerseys and perhaps the junior jerseys, and the manager would collect them all and put them in a bag, take them away and wash them, and then bring them back for next week. But after that, then they progressed. That I think they did a deal with one of the dry cleaners in town that they took over that mantle and carried on from there. But in lots of cases, we washed our own jersey. We'd take it home. I remember, you know, my mother, first of all, before I was married, and then my wife. You know, and that was a big job, because you're playing on grounds like Rutherford Park and some of these places were. Yeah, there were a bit of mud heaps on wet days and that, and you come home and and a lot of the women didn't have the facilities to you know, put it in the washing machine. They did it by hand and that, so it was a bit of an arduous task.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Oh, very interesting.
Does that go?
Through your playing days, Don, what was the kind of the worst scenario, the worst thing that the club ever encountered?
Well, generally speaking, we had good seasons all along, but I remember the one that we were being coached in I think it was 1963 by Lick Giulio, and he unfortunately passed away. The club, this was early in the week, and the club decided, or the family decided first of all, that the funeral was going to be on the following Saturday, and that we were set down that day to play rivals in the championship. We were leading in the senior championship, and because of the fact that the funeral was on the Saturday, our club decided to take the step of our senior team defaulting to rivals, which ensured that we unfortunately didn't win the championship that year, because the points that we lost gave rival the championship.
Mm. Yeah.
Did that adequately cover it?
Yeah, yeah. So we'll move into some questions more focusing on the club, moving away from playing days. Can you talk about some of we'll run this question into one, some of the highlights and kind of lowlights for the club. We'll start with highlights. So some of the great seasons that the club has had, or some of the great initiatives or projects that the club has done over the years.
Well, obviously the biggest one was when the club decided, this was prior to me joining the club, was that they had the area allocated to them by the Nelson City Council, and the likes of Bill Reid and others had negotiated with the council the area behind the present caretaker, who was Alf Wells at the time, and they said, right, we're going to build some club rooms. So away they went, they fundraised and took out the benches, and in 1949 it started. In 1950 I joined the club, and that was 5th grade, and our job was to go along to these working bees and that, and because we were small and young, and our jobs were to pick up the old concrete bags and empty bags and bits of timber that were lying around and tidy up and that, whereas the project was actually overseen by Terry Phillips and his father, Tinker. They were given the main job of constructing the club rooms and overseeing that it was done properly and up to regulations for the council. Mm. And that took a couple of 3 years, and it was really an auspicious part. I think it got the club more established. We had a home of our own, so to speak, rather than being at the Provincial Hotel or the Royal Hotel. When we had no home, and we used to have our meetings there apparently before my time and that.
Yeah. The club has been a part of Nelson for a long time, of course. Has it always been a big part of Nelson overall? Like, has it always been good buy-in? I mean, back in the 50s, the population of Nelson would be much smaller, so I don't know whether the club had a bigger profile or bigger influence in the community.
I think rugby was the notable Winters project. It used to be rugby and soccer and hockey. Those were the three major sports played in the winter here. Rugby was at Fowler Park. That was our home and headquarters for the Nelson Union. There was soccer was Victory Square, and hockey was the Botanics, and that's how it was for years. And and that's rugby was like, it was all relative to what the population was and that, and we went to college and played rugby up there and for the college, and some of them did and some didn't, and we came back and we carried on, and but they used to get good crowds at the fact, and once they won the Sydney Shield, it went through under MacIntrye, the whole thing took off. There was a new incentive. Everybody seemed to be talking rugby, whereas before they were a bit lukewarm and mediocre because the results of the rep team weren't really great.
Mm. This is kind of moving away from Nelson Club a little bit, but you talked about the Sydney Shield. That, in years gone by, that was a huge thing for the unions that were involved.
Yes.
Is it still the same today, or how is the
No, not now. No, it seems to have taken a second backing under the President's head over the Mitre Cup. That's the present title, I think it's called. Mm. With the amalgamation of Nelson with Marlborough and that, it's put a different slant on thing, and Sydney Shield has sort of been, unfortunately, demoted down, and there's been a fall off in playing strength in Buller and also the West Coast, which has affected their teams and that, and consequently the standard has slipped, I think, in the Sydney Shield challenges and that, but it's still played for.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm curious, you know, some of the questions I've got here, I'm curious to know how professionalism has changed the club rugby scene in New Zealand, and Nelson in particular.
Oh, you got a question there, haven't you?
Yeah, right. So I'm curious to know just about a little bit about some of the people of the club who have helped the club exist and run through the years. Who have been the biggest contributors or the most influential members of the club through the years?
Well, over the years that I've been involved in, the 69 years that I've been involved with the club, there's no doubt about it that if it hadn't been for the likes of Bill Reid, the club would have probably slipped into obscurity. But he was the whole strength of keeping the club going through all the years and the years and the years. And but after that, there's been different people and plenty of volunteers and good coaches and that sort of thing. And there's people that have stepped up after Bill, things like Fred McCormick, Noel Barton, and various guys like that have done a tremendous amount to continue the numerical strength and also the financial strength of the club. But Bill Reid stands out to me because when I joined, he was the be all and the end all of the club.
Yeah. So he was the author of the book.
Oh, the book with Arthur Swan.
Years,
Yeah, yes, definitely. I've got all his cuttings up there in the office. A lot of us volunteers used to go to the library and the museum and that thing and collate stuff for him, results and all that, bring it back to him, and he in turn worked in with the likes of the late Arthur Swan, and he did the book of the 100 Years, of which we call the Gospel, the Blue Bible, because it's all the history of the years of the first 100 years of the club.
Did the club have a strong sense of history leading up to that, or was it something that, I don't know, Bill Reid or others saw actually our 100th anniversary is coming up, we better do something about it?
I think the longevity of the club, because of its length of going, you know, when we had the controversial years with Wellington Football Club and the Christchurch Football Club about who was the oldest rugby football club, there's always been that little bit of doubt who it was, and prior to our centennial when Bill Reid and Arthur Swan produced the 100 Years, Arthur Swan was the historian also for the New Zealand Rugby Union, and he went and said to them, look, this has got to be clarified prior to the Nelson Rugby Football Club's 100 years, and then everybody's going to be more happier. So this is where Christchurch Club became the oldest football club, and we became the oldest, Nelson became the oldest rugby football club. Yeah. And that was the differentiation, and so that's how it's been done. And over the years, since then, you know, there's been always a little jib from Wellington Club about saying, oh, you know, we were the oldest playing through and all this sort of carry on that. But the clarification came from the letter. I actually saw the original letter from the New Zealand Union saying prior to our 100 years that this was stated, you are the oldest Nelson Rugby Football Club. So that clarified that.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear you say the volunteers helped out with the production of the book, collecting clippings and that sort of thing. The club probably relied a lot on volunteers to run, and it's probably like any club in the country, they rely on volunteers to run. But is there still the same sense of volunteering and spirit within the club today as what there was back in the old days? Because I get the sense that it probably felt like a big family in years gone by.
It's now more difficult, not only in the Nelson Rugby Football Club and other amateur organisations. You know, people have got so many other outside interests now that they're finding it difficult to get volunteers to go onto the committee and other organisations as well, because people have got other interests, and so therefore they won't volunteer to do the job. You've still got good coaches and that's the main thing. You know, when you look at our lower grades in the Nelson Club at the present time, along with Waimea, we've probably got the stronger numbers in the Nelson area. So that's a feather in our cap, but we seem to lose them when they get to college and they have other interests and they go into other sports, and particularly mixed sports. They seem to be going mountain biking and rowing and that, where there's males and females competing alongside each other, whereas rugby, I know that we have women's rugby, we have men's rugby, but it's two separate identities as far as the day of the sport, whereas you go to rowing or something like that, they're all mixed up on the actual day.
Yeah.
That's my observation. And these comments that I'm making are totally personally of me and mine, not of the clubs.
Yeah, yeah. How big is the club these days? It still fills all the grades and.
Oh well, I'm still the patron of the club, but the club, to my way of thinking, is still strong. We've got good performances and that, but we are finding difficulties in some respects because of the how should I put it? The new setup of Super Rugby and the Marco setup and all that, and these squads are picked and taken away, and several of your players, if they're really good and got potential, they get selected for those teams, so therefore they can't be playing club football and they can't be involved in that as well. So one supersedes the other, and the players' ambitions when they play these sports are to get higher honours, so obviously they go to those next ones up, and we're the losers. So we are weakened by their success, by us producing good players, is finding out that we're not getting the results on club day because they were playing for the Crusaders or they're playing for the Marcos.
I can see, does it swing both ways? Do you get, if people are chasing professional rugby careers, they need to start somewhere. Do you get more people coming to Nelson these days because they see Nelson as a feeder club with Crusaders? Do you get people coming in and trying their luck with the local clubs, and that strengthens the competition, or is it like you say? That the
way I see it, and I've got no proof of this, but behind the scenes, and when you've been involved with rugby as long as I have, and both as playing and as administrative, you can see, like when we're short, they go to the selectors and they say, now, where are we not strong enough? And they say, oh, it might be centre 3/4, or it might be side row forward, or we might want a hooker. So what do? They got the scouts, the talent scouts, and they look around and they find them perhaps one in Northland, one in East Coast, one playing for Thames Valley, or someone like that. Or there's a young fella just coming out of one of the colleges in somewhere else in New Zealand, and they earmark them and they chase them and they bring them to here. It's a detriment for the local talent, but it's the only way that they're going to perform on the representative field, because of the fact that they need to fill that weakness in their makeup of the rep side. So they're doing that, but it's to the detriment of the local players. That's my observation.
Yeah. And that happens at club level as well as the
yeah. Well, you've only got to take the fact, or I better not say that.
Okay. New Zealand Rugby has had its fair share of controversies through the years, controversies and highlights as new things have come into play, like the World Cup. What has been the club's position during some of the big moments of New Zealand Rugby, so like the World Cups or Springbok tours or New Zealand tours to South Africa?
Well, I remember vividly the 1981 one. There was a lot of controversy in New Zealand, and there probably still is to some of the people that are still living and for it and against it. And I remember the fact that several of us volunteers, we slept at the club rooms, and we took our turns to sleep down there at nights to safeguard, because the rumours were that that perhaps the club rooms would be damaged or defaced in some way. So that was one of the things for the 1981 Springbok tour. The World Cup one, well, everybody was quite excited about that being the first one, and I think everybody got in behind and said, yes, well, it's something different. Well, let's see how it pans out. And because I think New Zealand won the first one, it sort of cemented at home that this was the thing for the future.
And Nelson played a much bigger role in the second time we hosted the World Cup. Did the club get in behind that? Did it benefit from the increased profile of rugby in Nelson as a result?
I think, yes, definitely it did. I mean, rugby, the fact that we played these games here that were parts of the World Cup, it sort of encouraged the enthusiasm of the people that were swingers that would say, oh, well, I'm interested in rugby, but I'm not, sort of style. They went along to the games, they supported it, obviously with the attendances at the park. So consequently, it's sort of built up the feeling and plus the fact that when we amalgamated with Marlborough and we became the Marcos and that, it's brought in an extra enthusiasm in the town, and it's carried on through and the results have been productive since they've amalgamated, because of the added strength and the people they've brought in to bolster those teams. It's been really good.
Right. So you finished up playing in the early 60s, I think you said, or mid 60s?
64.
64?
Yeah, 64, yeah.
What was your involvement with the club after you finished playing?
Well, while I was playing, I was still involved on the committee. Then I became the treasurer. I was treasurer for 9 years. And then I did my, Noel Barton was the president, and he took sick. And so while he was in hospital, I used to visit him and talk to him about the club. And then I took over the next year after that. I did my term as president, and then I decided at the same time I was approached by the late Roy Mace, who was the president of the Nelson Rugby Union, and would I become interested in becoming secretary of the rugby union. So after considerable thought and discussions with my wife, I decided yes, I'd give it a try. So that started me off as secretary of the Nelson Rugby Union, and I was the last secretary of the old Nelson Union and the first secretary of the Nelson Bays Rugby Union. So a total of 9 years I did that. And during that time we used to meet most nights on a Monday night in the rugby season, and occasionally in the off season we'd have the one a month or something like that. And so that was quite, it furthered my experience on the administration. I went to 8 annual meetings of the New Zealand Rugby Union as a delegate. And after that, well, yeah, it was really eye-opening to see what went on at the annual meeting. They would normally call it the old wool sale, and that's when the delegates, had to sort of go and talk and scratch the back of somebody from North Auckland or Auckland or Wellington, and that to try to endeavour to get a rep game here against. And 9 times out of 10 you get Wellington B or you get Auckland B or something like that. You didn't get the top sides. So that was a bit unfortunate, but it was all eye-opening as far as that's concerned and that. So, but I was awarded the Craven Trophy in 1972 for the top administrator on the rugby union, and then in 1984 I won the Tennant Cup for the administrator of the Nelson Club. Yeah.
I was going to ask a question about the highlights as an administrator, but I guess they would have been up there.
Yeah, they were really good. Yeah, that was the highlights and that. And then in 2001, the Nelson City Council awarded me an award for the city for sports and leisure.
Yeah.
And so we got an award for that, a certificate to say that we'd done the right thing.
Yeah.
And in 1972, I think it was, when I was about 36, I was awarded life membership of the Nelson Rugby Football Club.
Did they make you one of the youngest life members?
It was, I was pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually you had to wait till be 100 just to be up there.
Yeah.
But it took the Nelson Bays Rugby Union a number of years to make me a life member, yeah. But I eventually got there too, so... I better not say too much about that.
Don, after 60 odd years, I think you said 69 years before, involvement with the club, what are your thoughts on the club's future?
Really, I think that it's a really great and a grand club. It's been good to me. I just hope that the present administrators can continue the good work that's been done for all their 149 years before, and that they'll go from strength to strength, and I'm sure that with certain personnel that they have got there, that they're going to make a good job of it. So I just hope that the new administrators keep ticking along, and we'll look forward to the future years.